I am lost. I lost my parents. Please, Uncle, find my parents. I want go home. The rain poured down over the quiet streets of Portland. Oregon, lightning flashed across the dark sky, turning the wet pavement silver for just a second before everything slipped back into shadow. Inside a small suburban house, the sound of shouting could be heard even over the storm. A little girl sat curled up beside the window, her knees to her chest, watching the raindrops race each other down the glass. Her name was Hurain Miller. 10 years old, blue eyes like her father, long brown hair like her mother, but right now, those eyes were filled with tears. Why can't they stop fighting? She whispered to herself. Her parents' voices echoed from the kitchen. You never listen to me, James, her mother shouted. And you never stop controlling everything, Emily, her father snapped back. Hurain covered her ears. She hated this part. The words, the anger, the way plates sometimes hit the counter too hard. Her parents didn't mean to scare her, but they did. She stood up slowly, picked up her little yellow raincoat from the hanger, and slipped on her sneakers. Maybe if I go out for a little while, she whispered. They'll calm down. Without making a sound, she opened the front door and stepped into the rain. The air outside was cold and sharp. The streets were mostly empty, except for a few parked cars and the flickering orange of a broken streetlight. Hurain walked down the sidewalk, kicking small puddles, humming softly to herself. The city looked strange at night, quiet but alive. She turned down a street she'd never been on before, lined with tall pine trees that swayed in the wind. After a few minutes, a white pickup truck slowed beside her. The window rolled down halfway, and a man's voice called out, Hey, kid! You lost or something? Hurain froze. The man looked to be in his 40s. Brown jacket, messy beard, kind eyes. He didn't look scary. But her teacher's voice echoed in her head. Never talk to strangers. I'm fine, she said quietly. You sure? It's pouring out here. You shouldn't be walking alone. She hesitated. Her clothes were soaked, her hair clinging to her face. The man nodded toward the gas station across the street. Tell you what, he said gently. Let's get you inside where it's warm. There's coffee, hot chocolate, and I'll call your parents for you. Sound good? Hurain looked around. The road was empty, the storm getting worse. Her lips trembled as thunder rolled through the sky. Okay, she said softly. Inside the gas station, warmth and light wrapped around her like a blanket. The man paid for a cup of hot chocolate and handed it to her. There you go, sweetheart. My name's Ethan, he said, crouching down so he was at her eye level. What's yours? Hurain, she whispered. That's a pretty name, Ethan said kindly. Where are your parents? Her eyes filled again. At home, but I don't know how to get back. Ethan nodded slowly, not showing the worry in his face. All right. Do you remember your street name? She shook her head. No, I ran out when they were fighting. Okay, he said calmly. No problem. We'll figure this out. He turned to the clerk, a middle-aged woman who was watching them. Can I use your phone? Need to call the police department? Missing kid. The woman nodded quickly. Ethan stepped aside and dialed the local number. Hey, it's Ethan Shaw here. Yeah, I found a little girl around 10. Says her name's Hurain. Looks scared. No ID, no number. Think you can send someone to the Pine Hill gas stop on Route 7? As he spoke, Hurain sat by the counter, her small hands wrapped around the warm cup. She watched the rain through the glass door. She felt safe for the first time since she'd left home, but also guilty. She whispered to herself, I just wanted them to stop fighting. When Ethan hung up, he smiled. All right, kiddo. The sheriff's deputy will be here in about 15 minutes. You're gonna be just fine, Hurain smiled weakly. Thank you, Mr. Ethan. No need for Mr., he said, chuckling. Just Ethan's fine. He pulled a chair and sat next to her. So what do you like to do? Red, draw? I like to draw animals, she said. And stars. Stars, huh? You got good taste. My daughter, well, she used to love drawing stars, too. Hurain looked up. Used to? Ethan's eyes darkened slightly. Yeah, she passed away 3 years ago. Car accident. I'm sorry, she whispered. He smiled gently. It's okay. You remind me of her a little, that's all. Suddenly, lightning flashed again, so bright the whole station flickered. The power went out for a second, then came back. The clerk jumped. That's the third time tonight. Damn storm. Ethan checked the time. Deputy should be close, but then his phone buzzed with a message. He looked at it, his face tightening slightly. The clerk noticed. Everything all right? He forced a smile. Yeah, just fine. But his fingers trembled slightly as he put the phone away. Outside, a black SUV pulled into the parking lot. It wasn't a police car. No sirens, no lights. Ethan frowned. Stay here, Horain, he said softly, standing up. Why? She asked. Just stay. I'll check. He walked to the door, wiping rain from his jacket. The SUV door opened and two men stepped out. Both wore dark coats and hats low over their faces. Ethan stiffened. What's going on? He asked. One of them flashed a card too quickly to read. We're from Child Services. Got the call about the lost kid. That was fast, Ethan muttered. Sheriff said 15 minutes. The taller man smiled. We were closer than that. Behind them, lightning flashed again. For a moment, Horain saw the reflection of something metallic at the man's waist. A gun, her heartbeat spiked. Ethan, she whispered. He turned, saw her frightened eyes, then looked back at the men. Something didn't feel right. He took a step back. You got any ID? The man smirked. You already saw it. No, I didn't. Let's wait for the sheriff, Ethan said firmly. The other man moved his hand slightly toward his jacket. Ethan's voice hardened. Don't. For a long, tense second, no one moved. The only sound was the rain hitting the roof. Then suddenly, the clerk screamed, They've got guns! Everything exploded into chaos. Ethan grabbed Horain's hand and pulled her toward the back door. Run! He shouted. The door slammed open, rain crashing against them as they stumbled outside. The night was alive with thunder and footsteps. Horain clutched Ethan's hand as he pulled her toward the alley behind the gas station. Bullets hit the metal trash bins nearby, making her scream. Ethan ducked behind a dumpster, breathing hard. Who are they? She cried. Not social workers, he said through gritted teeth. That's for sure. Why do they want me? I don't know, kid, but I'm not letting them get you. He peeked around the corner. The two men were searching with flashlights, shouting to each other. Ethan's heart pounded. He'd been a cop once, years ago, but he thought he'd left that life behind. Not tonight. They moved silently between the buildings, rain masking their footsteps. After 10 minutes of running, they reached a small, empty diner at the edge of the highway. The sign flickered. Open 24 hours. Though it clearly wasn't, Ethan kicked the door gently. It opened. They slipped inside. The diner smelled like dust and old coffee. Ethan found a booth and helped Horain sit down. She was trembling, soaked, eyes wide with fear. Hey, he said softly, crouching in front of her. You're safe now. I promise, she shook her head. They'll find us. Not tonight, he said. We'll rest here. Tomorrow I'll get you home. Do you really promise? She asked in a whisper. Ethan looked into her tearful eyes, the same blue shade his daughter once had, and said quietly, Yeah, kid. I promise. Outside, thunder rolled again. The men searched the streets but couldn't find them. Inside the diner, Horain leaned against Ethan's shoulder, finally falling asleep. Ethan stared out the rain-streaked window, a deep unease tightening in his chest. He didn't know who those men were, but something told him this wasn't just about a lost child. It was something much darker, and he had just stepped right into it. The wind outside had quieted, but the storm inside Ethan's mind hadn't. He sat in the empty diner, staring through the foggy window while Horain slept on the booth seat beside him. Her small hands clutched his jacket like she was holding on to safety itself. Ethan had seen many things in his life. Fights, blood loss, but nothing made his chest ache like this little girl trembling in her sleep. He whispered to himself, What the hell did you get into, Ethan? He pulled out his phone, hesitated for a second, and finally dialed an old number. A rough voice answered after 2 rings. Yeah? Ben, it's me. Ethan. Jesus, man, it's been years. You know what time it is? I wouldn't call if it wasn't serious. I need a favor. There was a pause. What kind of favor? I've got a kid with me. 10 years old. Lost. 2 men pretending to be child services came after her with guns. Ben's voice sharpened instantly. Where are you? Old diner off Route 7. Stay put. I'll come get you. Don't talk to anyone. Copy that. Ethan hung up and exhaled slowly. His mind was spinning. Why would armed men come after a 10-year-old? Unless she wasn't just any lost kid. An hour later, the sound of tires crunching wet gravel broke the silence. Ethan looked out and saw an old Ford Explorer pull up beside the diner. He woke Horain gently. Hey, kid! Time to go. She rubbed her eyes, confused. Where are we going? Somewhere safe. Outside, a man in his 50s stepped out of the Ford, wearing a dark jacket and a baseball cap. Ben Keller, he said, shaking Ethan's hand firmly. You look worse than I remember, Ethan smirked. Still charming as ever, Ben crouched to Horain's level. Hey, sweetheart. You okay? She nodded nervously, holding Ethan's sleeve. She doesn't talk much, Ethan said quietly. Been through hell tonight. Ben's eyes hardened. Let's move before someone tracks your call. They drove in silence for miles, heading deeper into the countryside. The highway lights faded behind them, replaced by endless trees and the hum of tires on wet asphalt. Horain sat in the back seat. Her gaze lost out the window. Ethan kept glancing at her in the rearview mirror. He remembered his own daughter. Lily, gone 3 years now. The same seat. The same soft breathing. He swallowed hard. Forcing the memory back down, Ben broke the silence. So, fill me in. You sure they weren't legit? Ethan shook his head. Positive. No badges. No cars with state plates. And they were armed. Any idea who they were? No clue. But the way they moved. Trained. Ex-military, maybe, Ben grunted. Damn. He looked over his shoulder at the girl. You sure she's just a lost kid? Ethan's jaw tightened. She's scared, Ben. That's all I know. They stopped at a small cabin tucked deep in the forest. Ben's hunting cabin. Unused for years. Inside, it smelled of old wood and coffee grounds. Ben switched on a lantern. Power's out. We're off-grid here. Ethan wrapped Horain in a blanket and sat beside her near the small fireplace. You hungry? She nodded. Ben heated a can of soup over the fire while Ethan spoke softly. Hey, kid, can you tell me your last name again? Miller, she said. And your parents' names? James and Emily Miller. Ben froze mid-stir. Wait a second. Miller? Ethan frowned. You know them? Ben looked uneasy. Not personally, but that name's been all over the news this week. He grabbed his tablet from his bag and turned it on, connecting through an offline satellite link. After a few seconds, a headline appeared. Federal engineer James Miller missing after data breach at Defense Research Facility. Ethan's stomach dropped. What the hell? Ben kept scrolling. His wife, Emily Miller, reportedly cooperating with investigators. Their daughter, Horain, went missing 2 days ago. Ethan's eyes darted to the girl. She was staring into the fire, unaware. He whispered, That means those men weren't random. They were after her because of her dad. Ben nodded grimly. If her father was working on defense tech, there's a chance someone wants leverage. Ethan's fists clenched. They were going to take her. Ben, yeah, and now they'll know who has her. Hours later, while Horain slept again, Ethan stepped outside into the cold night air. The forest was silent except for the crackle of rain dripping off branches. Ben joined him, lighting a cigarette. So what's the plan? Ben asked. We take her back home. Straight to her mother. You sure that's safe? If federal agents are involved, they might not even let her near the house. Then I'll find another way. Ben exhaled smoke. You can't protect her forever, man. Ethan looked out into the trees. Watch me. By morning, the storm had passed. Horain woke to the smell of pancakes. Ethan was flipping them on an old skillet. Humming off key. Morning, sleepyhead, he said. She smiled for the first time. That smells good. Well, I don't cook for just anyone, he teased. Ben poured coffee and nodded toward the road map spread across the table. Her mom's address is in Portland. That's about 2 hours if we stick to back roads. Ethan nodded. We move soon. But before they could leave, the distant roar of engines made them freeze. Ben looked through the blinds, 2 black SUVs rolling slowly down the dirt road. They found us, he hissed. Ethan grabbed his pistol from the counter. Horain, get under the table now. She obeyed without question. Ben took position by the door, whispering, there's no signal out here. We're blind. Ethan peeked through the window. 4 men got out, all dressed in dark tactical gear. No insignia. They're not cops, Ethan muttered. Ben gripped his shotgun. We hold them off long enough to get the girl out? Ethan nodded. Back window. There's a trail down to the creek. She can hide there. He crouched beside Horain. Listen, kid, I need you to be brave, okay? Run when I say run. Tears welled up in her eyes. You're coming too, right? He smiled. Always. The first shot shattered the cabin window. Ethan pushed Horain toward the back door as Ben returned fire. Glass flew, wood splintered, and smoke filled the air. Go! Ethan shouted. Horain ran out into the forest, clutching her blanket. Rain had started again, light but cold. She ran as fast as she could, her heart pounding. Behind her, gunfire echoed. She screamed Ethan's name, but her voice was swallowed by the wind. At the cabin, Ethan ducked behind a wall, reloading. Ben! You good? Ben grunted. Barely. They're circling left. Ethan peeked out and shot one of the attackers in the leg. Another bullet grazed his shoulder. He cursed under his breath. We're pinned, Ben shouted. You need to go after the kid. I'll cover you. I'm not leaving you, Ethan yelled back. Ben gave a half smile. That's an order, rookie. Before Ethan could argue, Ben opened the door and fired a burst, drawing their attention. Ethan ran through the back door into the forest. Behind him, he heard one last explosion, and then silence. Ben, he whispered, but there was no answer. He kept running. He found Horain crouched behind a fallen log near the creek, crying silently. When she saw him, she ran into his arms. I thought you were gone, she sobbed. He hugged her tight. Not a chance. They stayed like that for a long time, surrounded by rain and smoke drifting through the forest. Finally, he whispered, We can't stay here. We need to move. They followed the creek downstream, walking for what felt like hours. By noon, they reached an old rest stop, a rundown gas station that looked abandoned. Ethan checked inside. It was empty. He found a working payphone miraculously still connected. He dialed the Portland Police Department using a pay code. Officer Shaw, badge 7294, former Portland PD, he said. I have information on the missing Miller child. I need to speak directly to Detective Laura Finch. After a pause, a calm voice came on. This is Finch. Ethan explained everything in quick, clipped words. The car, the fake agents, the shootout. Detective Finch's tone changed. Ethan, listen carefully. Those men aren't feds. They're private operatives working for a defense contractor called Harker Dynamics, the same company James Miller worked for before he disappeared. Why are they after his daughter? Ethan asked. Her father embedded something in a microchip prototype, a fail-safe code only she knows how to unlock. Ethan stared at Horain, shocked. She's 10. You're telling me she... Yes. Miller trained her to memorize a numeric sequence disguised as a drawing. They need it. Without it, the data's useless. Ethan's mind reeled. So they want her memory. Exactly, Finch said. You need to bring her to me. I'll send a secure team, real cops this time. No. What? I don't trust anyone right now. I'll bring her myself. Ethan. But he'd already hung up. That night, they found shelter in an old motel off the highway. The neon sign buzzed weakly in the rain. Vacancy. Inside, Horain sat cross-legged on the bed, drawing on a notepad Ethan had bought her. Stars. Houses, a family holding hands. He sat nearby, cleaning his shoulder wound silently. Ethan, she said softly, yeah? Why do bad people want to hurt me? He sighed, sitting beside her. Sometimes, kid, people want things so badly they forget what's right. She looked at him with big, serious eyes. Did you ever forget what's right? The question hit him harder than he expected. Yeah, he said finally. Once, a long time ago. And I've been trying to fix it ever since. She reached out and touched his bandaged arm. You saved me. That's right, he smiled faintly. Thanks, kiddo. As she drifted off to sleep, Ethan looked at her drawing again. In the corner of the page, among the stars, she'd drawn a strange sequence of numbers. There were 39126. He stared at it for a long time. The code. It had to be. He folded the page carefully and slipped it into his pocket. Outside, thunder rolled again in the distance. The storm wasn't over, not yet. The hum of the old motel's neon sign buzzed faintly through the night. Ethan sat by the window, the glow of a cigarette ember fading and brightening with every breath. Outside, the rain had turned to mist, curling across the empty parking lot like smoke from a dying fire. Behind him, Horaine slept soundly, her head resting on the pillow, her tiny hand gripping the corner of the blanket. Ethan glanced at her and whispered, "You've been through hell, kid. But we're not done yet." He flicked the cigarette into the sink and pulled out the folded drawing she'd made earlier. Stars, a smiling family, and the sequence of numbers. 7, 3, 9, now 1, 2, 6. He stared at them for a long time. He didn't know much about computers or defense tech, but something about those numbers felt deliberate. He'd seen men kill for less than that. By sunrise, the rain had stopped completely. The air smelled like wet asphalt and pine. Ethan packed their things quietly, then touched Horaine's shoulder. "Hey, sunshine, time to move." She rubbed her eyes. "Where are we going now?" "Home," he said. "To your mom." Her lips quivered a little. "Will she be mad at me?" Ethan crouched down, brushing her hair gently out of her face. Parents don't stay mad when they find their kids safe. "Trust me," she nodded, slipping on her little sneakers. They left the motel before dawn, driving the rusted pickup Ben had left behind. The sky glowed faint pink on the horizon, but Ethan's chest felt heavy. Ben's face wouldn't leave his mind. He muttered softly, "You didn't deserve that, old friend." As they drove along the empty highway, Horaine suddenly asked, "Ethan, did my dad do something bad?" The question made his hands tighten on the steering wheel. "Why do you ask that?" "Because everyone's looking for him, and now, for me." Ethan hesitated before answering. "I don't think your dad was a bad man. Maybe he found out something other people didn't want him to know?" Horaine frowned. "Like a secret?" "Exactly." She looked down at her drawing pad and whispered, "Daddy said secrets can be dangerous. Even if they're true." Ethan looked at her through the rearview mirror. "What did he tell you before he disappeared?" She thought for a moment. "He said if anyone ever tried to take me, I should draw the stars." "Because stars remember everything." "Stars remember everything?" Ethan repeated softly. "Uh-huh. He said when I draw the right stars, he'll find me." Ethan's heartbeat quickened. He reached into his jacket, unfolded the paper, and studied the numbers again. Stars. Coordinates. It hit him suddenly. What if those numbers were GPS coordinates? 739126. He quickly pulled out his phone, opened his offline maps, and typed in the pattern. The map zoomed in on a location outside Portland, a remote area near the Columbia River, labeled Harker Dynamics Research Facility, Restricted Zone. Ethan muttered, "Well, I'll be damned." By noon, they reached a gas station near the outskirts of Portland. Ethan filled the tank while keeping an eye on every passing car. Something about the silence felt off. Too heavy. Too careful. Inside the gas station, Horaine grabbed a chocolate bar and smiled. "Can we get this?" Ethan chuckled. "Yeah, but don't tell your mom I let you have candy for lunch." As they walked back to the truck, Ethan's gut suddenly tightened. A black sedan parked near the pumps had tinted windows. He could swear it hadn't been there 5 minutes ago. He lifted Horaine into the passenger seat and whispered, "Buckle up fast! What's wrong?" Just a hunch. He started the engine, and that's when he saw it. In the mirror, the black sedan's engine roared to life. "Hold on," he shouted. Tires screeched as Ethan sped out of the gas station, splashing through puddles. The sedan followed, gaining fast. Bullets cracked against the tailgate. Horain screamed, ducking down. "Ethan!" "I know, stay low." He swerved onto the highway, weaving between cars. The sedan pulled alongside. A man leaned out the window, firing again. Ethan jerked the wheel, ramming the truck into their car. The sedan spun out, hit a guardrail, and burst into smoke. Ethan didn't slow down. He kept driving, eyes locked ahead, knuckles white. After a few minutes, Horain's shaky voice whispered, "Are they gone?" "Yeah," he said breathlessly. "For now." They stopped at an abandoned barn outside the city. Ethan parked the truck behind it and killed the engine. The silence afterward was deafening. Horain sat quietly, watching him. "You're bleeding again," she said softly. Pointing to his arm, he looked down. The bandage from before had reopened. He laughed weakly. "Guess I'm falling apart." She reached into the first aid kit and tried to help him wrap it. He smiled at her concentration. "You're good at this. My mom's a nurse," she said proudly. That made him pause. "Yeah? Then she's probably going crazy looking for you." Horain nodded, her expression turning sad again. "Do you think she hates my dad now?" Ethan's voice softened. "I think she's scared, just like you." As night fell, they built a small fire inside the barn. Horain sat close to Ethan, sketching stars again. He watched her hand move, slow and deliberate. After a while, she whispered, "Ethan, when my dad left, he said he was sorry." "For what?" "For making me remember things no kid should remember." Her eyes filled with tears. "What did he mean?" Ethan exhaled. "I think he meant that he trusted you more than anyone, Horain. He gave you something powerful, something only you could keep safe." She wiped her tears. "Then I can't forget," Ethan nodded. "And you won't. I promise." The next morning, Ethan called Detective Finch again from a payphone. "This is Shaw. I think I found where Miller's data is hidden. The Harker facility, outside Portland." There was a pause. "How the hell did you figure that out?" Finch asked. "Let's just say the kid's smarter than she looks." "We're going there." "Ethan, don't. That place is guarded like Fort Knox. Bring her in. We can handle this." "Not a chance," Ethan said. "I'm not handing her to anyone until I know who's clean." "Damn it, Ethan. You're not a cop anymore." "Yeah," he said, hanging up. "But I still remember how to protect people." They reached the outskirts of Portland that evening. The Harker facility loomed in the distance, a massive compound surrounded by fences, cameras and guard towers. It looked less like a lab and more like a prison. Ethan parked half a mile away and took out binoculars. "Looks locked up tight," he murmured. Horain leaned over. "Daddy worked there?" "Yeah, maybe he's still there." Her eyes brightened. "Really?" Ethan hesitated. "Maybe." He scanned the perimeter, spotting a drainage tunnel leading under the fence. "That's our way in." The tunnel was narrow, wet, and smelled like rust. Horain crawled through first, flashlight trembling in her hand. Ethan followed close behind, gun ready. They emerged behind a row of storage crates near the east wing of the compound. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. Ethan checked his surroundings. "Stay close." They moved between shadows, staying low, through a window. They could see a lab filled with computers and security monitors, and there, at the center of the room, stood James Miller. Horain gasped. "Daddy!" Ethan's heart pounded. "Wait!" Before he could stop her, she ran toward the door. It opened with a hiss, and in a flash, alarms started blaring. Ethan cursed, raising his weapon. Guards poured in from both sides. "Run!" he shouted, but Horain froze as her father turned toward her, pale, exhausted, eyes wide with disbelief. "Horain?" he whispered. "Daddy!" They ran toward each other, but before they could touch, a loud crack echoed. Ethan spun around and fired at the nearest guard, dropping him instantly. Smoke filled the hall. Miller grabbed Horain and pulled her behind a console. Ethan joined them. panting. "Your timing sucks," Miller muttered. Ethan glared. "You're welcome." In the chaos, Miller explained in hurried whispers. "They've been forcing me to complete a weapons algorithm, one that could control drone strikes worldwide. I built a lock inside the system that only Harain can unlock." Ethan stared. "You used your own kid as the key?" "It was the only way to keep them from using it," Miller snapped. "I didn't know they'd come after her this soon." Harain clung to his arm. "Daddy, I missed you." Miller's voice broke. "I missed you more, my little star." Sirens wailed louder as red lights flashed overhead. Ethan checked his ammo. "We need to move." "They'll be here any second," Miller nodded. "There's a service tunnel beneath the mainframe. Leads outside, but I need 1 minute to erase the project before we go." "Make it 30 seconds, Ethan said. As Miller typed rapidly into the system, the monitors flickered with strings of code. Harain watched silently, memorizing every number he entered, her sharp mind capturing everything. Suddenly, the screen flashed. "Erase sequence initiated." "Got it," Miller said. Then a voice echoed over the speakers. "Well, well, Mr. Miller, I was beginning to think you'd lost your touch." Ethan froze. The voice belonged to Director Harker himself, the man behind it all. Leaving so soon, Harker's tone was calm, cold. "You know I can't let that happen." Miller grabbed Harain's hand. "Ethan, take her!" "No," Ethan said. "We go together. Go!" Miller shouted. Guards burst into the lab. Ethan fired back, dragging Harain through the side door. Miller stayed behind, sealing it shut. "Daddy!" she screamed, pounding the door. "Go, baby!" "Be my light," he shouted back. The explosion came seconds later. The lab lit up like daylight, shaking the ground beneath their feet. Ethan shielded her from the blast, debris raining around them. When the smoke cleared, there was nothing left of the east wing. Harain sobbed into his chest. "He's gone." Ethan held her tightly. "He saved you, kid. Don't let that be for nothing." They made it out through the service tunnel just before dawn. Behind them, the facility burned, black smoke rising into the pale sky. Police and emergency sirens wailed in the distance. Ethan and Harain climbed a hill overlooking the ruins. The girl wiped her tears and whispered, "He said I'm his light." Ethan put a hand on her shoulder. "And he was right." She looked up at him, eyes glistening. "Then I have to finish what he started." He frowned. "What do you mean?" She held up her drawing pad. On the last page, she'd drawn a constellation, and beneath it, another sequence of numbers, different from before. "Daddy said the stars remember everything," she whispered. "I think he left me another message." Ethan stared at the drawing, then at the rising sun. He had no idea what lay ahead, but he knew one thing for certain. The little girl beside him wasn't just lost anymore. She was leading the way. And somewhere out there, in the code, her father's truth was still alive. The morning after the explosion was strangely quiet. Portland's skyline shimmered under a pale orange haze as fire trucks and helicopters swarmed the Harker Dynamics facility, now reduced to twisted metal and smoke. From the hill above the river, Ethan watched the chaos unfold through a pair of binoculars. "Whole damn place is gone," he muttered. Beside him, Harain hugged her knees, eyes fixed on the column of black smoke. "That's where Daddy was." Ethan's throat tightened. "He made sure you got out, kid." "That's what matters now. But what if he's still alive?" she whispered. He hesitated. In his heart, he wanted to say, maybe. But the soldier in him knew the odds. Still, he put a hand on her shoulder. "Then we'll find him." She looked up at him, tear-streaked but fierce. "Promise?" Ethan nodded once. "Promise." They hid in the back alleys until noon, avoiding patrols and news vans. Every TV screen and shop windows showed the same headline. Harker Dynamics explosion. Former defense scientist suspected of sabotage. A photo of James Miller flashed across the screen, and right below it, a grainy image of Ethan. The words beneath it read, Ex-Marine Ethan Shaw wanted for questioning. Ethan cursed under his breath. Great. Now we're both ghosts. Hurain tugged his sleeve. What does wanted mean? He sighed. Means they think we did something bad. But we didn't. I know, kid. He looked around. Doesn't mean they'll believe us. They took refuge in an old auto repair shop at the edge of the industrial district. Inside, the air smelled like oil and rust. Ethan pulled the truck inside and closed the shutters. Hurain sat on the workbench, pulling out her sketchbook. I think Daddy left me another message. Ethan leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Let's see it. She flipped to the last page, a star map drawn with careful precision. This time, the constellation looked familiar. Orion. Beneath it were 6 numbers. 42, 361, 1122.872. Ethan frowned. Those look like coordinates. He grabbed an old laptop from a shelf and booted it up, using a portable battery. The map loaded slowly, 1 pixel at a time, until a location appeared on the screen, Rogue. River Valley, he read aloud. Southern Oregon, middle of nowhere. What's there? Hurain asked. He zoomed in. The map showed an old structure labeled Sable Ridge Observatory, closed in 2015. Ethan's gut twisted. An observatory. He used stars? Of course. Hurain smiled faintly. Daddy used to take me to watch the stars. He said they never lie. Ethan nodded. Then that's where we're going. They set off before nightfall, following the back roads to avoid checkpoints. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the trees as they drove south. For a while, neither of them spoke. Hurain stared out the window, lost in thought, clutching the locket around her neck. Finally, she said softly, Ethan, do you have a family? He blinked, caught off guard. Had my wife and little girl? A long time ago. What happened? He hesitated, eyes fixed on the road. Car accident. I wasn't there when it happened. I was overseas. Hurain reached out and gently touched his arm. I'm sorry. He smiled sadly. Yeah, me too. The silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. It was something else. Shared loss. Shared understanding. By midnight, they reached a small town near Medford. They stopped at a diner that looked like it hadn't closed in decades. The waitress gave them a tired smile as they sat in a corner booth. What'll it be, hon? She asked. Ethan ordered coffee and a grilled cheese for Hurain. The girl grinned as the plate arrived. Hot cheese melting between buttery bread. It was the first real meal she'd had in days. As they ate, the waitress flipped on the TV behind the counter. A reporter spoke urgently. Authorities have confirmed the death of scientist James Miller in yesterday's explosion. Investigators believe his daughter, Hurain Miller, may still be alive, possibly abducted by former Marine Ethan Shaw. Ethan froze mid-sip. Hurain looked at him, panic in her eyes. They think you took me? He nodded grimly. We need to go, now. They slipped out the back door, but as they reached the truck, headlights flared behind them. A black SUV screeched to a stop. Armed men stepped out, not police. But private security, Harker's men. Run, Ethan shouted. Bullets ripped through the air as they dashed into the forest behind the diner. Ethan fired back, buying them time. Branches whipped against his face as they ran, through the trees. They didn't stop until the gunfire faded, completely. They hid inside an abandoned cabin miles from the road. Hurain's breathing was ragged, her small hands trembling. Ethan crouched beside her. You okay? She nodded weakly. I'm just scared. He handed her a blanket. You did good, kid. Real good. She looked at him, eyes shimmering. Why are they chasing us? Because your dad's work could control something big. Satellites, drones, maybe even global defense systems. And without you, they can't finish it. She swallowed hard. So I'm the key. Ethan nodded. Yeah, but you're also the only one who can shut it down for good. The next morning, Ethan found an old map in the cabin and traced their route toward Rogue Valley. They were only a few hours away from the observatory. But something didn't sit right. How did Harker's men keep finding them? He checked the truck carefully, and then he saw it. A small metallic device under the bumper. A tracker. Damn it, he hissed, yanking it free and crushing it under his boot. He turned to Harain. We've been tagged. That's how they knew. Her eyes widened. So they'll come again? Yeah, which means we can't stay long. He threw the device into a nearby stream, watching it sink out of sight. By afternoon, they finally reached Sable Ridge Observatory. The place stood silent among pine-covered hills, a giant white dome against the sky, its windows shattered and doors rusted. A sign at the gate read, "Property of U.S. Government, restricted access." Ethan forced the door open. Inside, dust motes floated through beams of sunlight. Old telescopes stood like skeletons of a forgotten age. Harain ran her fingers along a broken control panel. "Daddy brought me here once," she whispered. "He said the stars could keep secrets." Ethan raised his flashlight. "Let's find out what kind of secret he left." They climbed the metal stairs to the observation deck. At the top sat an old computer terminal, covered in dust but still humming faintly, powered by a backup generator. Harain touched the screen. A login prompt appeared. "Enter access code." Ethan stared at her. "You think you know it?" She nodded slowly. "Daddy made me remember everything." Her fingers danced over the keyboard. 739126. The screen blinked, then words appeared. "Hello, Harain. If you're seeing this, it means I'm gone." Harain gasped. "It's Daddy's voice." A recording began to play. James Miller's calm, weary tone filled the empty observatory. "They'll tell you I'm dead. Maybe I am. But what matters is what I left behind. The system I built, Project Sentinel, can control autonomous weapons networks across the world. I designed it to protect humanity. They turned it into something else. You are the only one who can stop them now." Harain covered her mouth as tears rolled down her cheeks. "I locked the master command under your name, encrypted in the stars. The final key is inside your drawing, Harain. Only you can finish what I started. Don't let them find it first." The recording ended. The silence afterward was deafening. Ethan knelt beside her. "What did he mean in your drawing?" She flipped through her sketchbook, eyes wide. The last few pages were filled with constellations, but when she turned them under the flashlight, tiny numbers appeared beneath each one, invisible ink glowing faintly. Ethan whispered, "Coordinates. Each one leads somewhere different. But which one is the right one?" she asked. Before he could answer, the floor below them creaked. Ethan drew his gun instantly. Voices echoed from below. "They're here! Move in!" Harker's men had found them again. "Hide!" Ethan hissed. He pushed Harain behind a steel pillar just as the door burst open. Bullets tore through the air. Ethan returned fire, dropping one guard. But there were too many. He grabbed a smoke grenade from his belt and hurled it. The observatory filled with thick white smoke. He grabbed Harain's hand. "Go, down the back stairs." They ran through the narrow hallways, the sound of boots pounding behind them. At the exit, Harker himself stood waiting, calm, smiling. "Going somewhere?" he asked. Ethan aimed his gun. "Step aside." Harker's gaze shifted to Harain. "You have something that belongs to me, little girl?" "She's not yours," Ethan growled. Harker smirked. "Oh, but she is. Her father built the key, and she is." "The key!" He raised his pistol, and that's when Harain did something no one expected. She threw her sketchbook into the fire pit beside the wall. The pages burst into flames. "No!" Harker roared. Ethan seized the moment, firing twice, hitting Harker's shoulder. The man dropped his gun. Screaming, Ethan scooped Harain up and ran into the woods behind the observatory. They didn't stop, running until the building was a distant silhouette against the stars. They collapsed near the river, breathless. Ethan looked at her. "Why did you burn it?" She wiped her tears. "Because Daddy said secrets are only safe when no one can use them." He stared at her for a long time, amazed at the courage in that tiny frame. Your dad would have been proud, he said finally. She sniffled. What now? Ethan looked toward the horizon. We disappear. Start over. Maybe tell your mom what really happened. When it's safe. She leaned against him. You won't leave me, right? He wrapped an arm around her. Not a chance. Above them, the stars shimmered through the clouds, silent witnesses to everything they'd endured. And somewhere, far beyond those stars, a father's secret remained, burned, hidden, but not forgotten. To be continued in Part 5, Final Chapter. Horain and Ethan's journey reaches its final showdown. As the truth resurfaces from the ashes, they discover that one secret survived. One that could either save the world or end it. The night was endless. Dark clouds swallowing the moon, cold wind howling through the Oregon forest. Ethan and Horain sat near the dying embers of their fire, huddled under a worn-out blanket. Neither of them had spoken for hours. Horain clutched the locket around her neck, the one her father had given her. It was small, silver, shaped like a star. She turned it in her hand again and again until suddenly she noticed something strange. Ethan, she whispered, there's writing inside. He leaned closer, flashlight flickering over the metal. Tiny letters were engraved along the inner rim. Look where light meets shadow. Ethan frowned. What does that mean? Horain's brow furrowed in thought. Daddy said the stars remember everything. Maybe it's another clue. He sighed, rubbing his temples. We burned the drawings, kid. If that was the key... No, she interrupted softly. He wouldn't leave just one way. Ethan looked at her, the firelight reflecting in her eyes, full of determination far beyond her years. He nodded. Okay, let's find out. By dawn, they reached a nearby ranger station. Ethan broke the lock quietly and slipped inside to use the old computer terminal. He typed in the phrase, Sable Ridge Observatory Light Shadow Coordinates, into the search logs. One archived file appeared. Solar Mapping Test 2015. Dr. James Miller. He opened it. The file showed an image of the observatory dome with laser lines drawn across the ground. Sun position data. At the bottom of the blueprint were handwritten notes in Miller's messy scrawl. Project Sentinel Backup Core, hidden in reflection path at Equinox Light Point. Ethan muttered. He hid something in the observatory. Not data. Something physical. Horain's voice trembled. Like what? Could be a drive, a hard disk, maybe even a failsafe. He looked up. If it's still there, Harker will come back for it. Then we have to get it first. By the time they returned to the observatory, it was nearly evening again. The air still smelled faintly of smoke from the explosion, and the surrounding woods were eerily silent. Ethan kept his gun ready, eyes scanning every shadow. Inside, the building was half collapsed, metal beams twisted, glass shattered. But the main dome still stood, cracked but intact. Horain stepped carefully across the floor, her flashlight dancing over the walls. Daddy used to say light hides what the dark can't see. Ethan shined his flashlight along the curve of the dome. Then he saw it, a faint reflection from the mirror array near the telescope's base. Wait, he said. Turn off your light. They stood in darkness for a moment. As the first rays of dawn crept through the broken ceiling, the sunlight hit one cracked mirror, then another, and finally landed on a small metal panel near the floor. Found it, Ethan breathed. He pried open the panel. Inside was a tiny compartment containing a sealed black drive, marked only with a star symbol, the same shape as Horain's locket. Her breath caught. That's it. Daddy's backup. Ethan held it in his hand. If this really holds what he said, this could expose everything Harker's been doing. But won't they come for it? They already are. The sound of engines echoed in the distance. Ethan cursed. They're here. He grabbed the drive, stuffed it into his jacket, and pulled Horain close. We move now. They ran out the back of the observatory just as 3 SUVs rolled up the dirt road. Dozens of armed men poured out. led by a bloodied but furious Director Harker. "Fan out," he shouted. "They're still here!" Ethan and Horain scrambled through the forest, gunfire ringing behind them. Bullets tore through the branches. Ethan ducked behind a fallen log and fired back, taking down 2 men before reloading. Horain crouched low, clutching the locket to her chest. "Ethan, there's too many!" "Keep moving," he barked. "Down by the river!" They sprinted through the trees, sliding down the muddy slope toward the water. The river roared ahead, cold, wide, fast. Ethan turned to her. "You can swim?" She nodded fearfully. "A little." He gave her the drive. "You hold this no matter what happens. Understand? But no buts, kid. You're the only one who can keep it safe." She looked at him, tears forming. "You're not coming?" He smiled faintly. "I'll be right behind you." Before she could answer, he shoved her gently into the river. She gasped as the icy current pulled her away. Ethan turned just as Harker emerged from the trees with his gun raised. "Where's the girl?" Harker demanded. Ethan smirked. "Somewhere you'll never reach." Harker fired, the bullet tearing into Ethan's shoulder. Spinning him backward, he gritted his teeth, raised his gun and fired back. Harker staggered, hit in the leg. The 2 men faced each other, both bleeding, both barely standing. "You think you've saved her?" Harker spat. "Without me, that data will destroy everything." Ethan's voice was low, cold. "Then maybe it should." He fired one last shot. Harker fell. Ethan stumbled toward the riverbank. Vision blurring, he could see Horain downstream, struggling but alive. Clinging to a branch, relief washed over him. He smiled faintly, then collapsed. Hours later, Horain crawled ashore on the opposite bank, soaked and shivering. The drive was still in her grasp. She looked back. The forest on the far side was silent. "Ethan," she whispered. There was no answer, only the sound of the river, endless and cold. She pressed the locket to her heart. "I'll finish it, Daddy, I promise." 3 days later, Portland, Oregon. The news channels were in chaos again. Reports of corruption, data leaks, and secret experiments flooded the airwaves. Anonymous. Files had been sent to major media outlets, all traced back to Cajun Project, Sentinel, and no one knew where they came from. 6 months passed. A quiet neighborhood in Washington. A woman stepped onto her porch, watering her flowers. Her name was Claire Miller, Horain's mother. She had spent months grieving, believing both her husband and daughter were gone. Then one morning, she heard a knock on the door. When she opened it, she froze. "Mom," Horain whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. Claire dropped the watering can and fell to her knees, wrapping her arms around her daughter. "My baby, my baby." They cried together for what felt like forever. When Claire finally pulled back, she looked at the small silver locket around her daughter's neck. "Horain, how did you find your way home?" Horain smiled faintly. "A soldier helped me." "His name was Ethan," Claire frowned. "Where is he now?" Horain looked at the horizon, the setting sun casting golden light across the yard. She whispered, "He said he'd always be right behind me." Weeks later, while unpacking, Horain opened the locket again. Inside, a hidden compartment clicked open, something she hadn't seen before. Inside was a tiny memory card, barely the size of a fingernail, a note unfolded beneath it, in her father's handwriting. "For when the world is ready to listen. The truth is never lost, only waiting to be found." She held the card tightly, staring out the window at the stars beginning to appear. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled, or maybe it was something else. Something rising again. She smiled sadly. "Don't worry. Daddy, I'll keep the light safe." Epilogue, 1 year later. A remote island in the Pacific. A man sat on a porch overlooking the sea, one arm bandaged, a faint scar tracing his jawline. He sipped his coffee, flipping through a newspaper. The headline read, "Project Sentinel shut down. Government officials under investigation. He smiled. A radio nearby crackled with static. Then a small voice came through. Recorded. Familiar. Thank you. Ethan, for being my light. Ethan Shaw leaned back in his chair, eyes on the horizon, the wind rustling through the palm trees. Anytime. Kid, he murmured. As the sun dipped into the ocean, the light shimmered across the water, where light met shadow, the place where everything began, and where, finally, everything found peace. The end. The Lost Light, a story of courage, sacrifice, and the unbreakable bond between a child and the man who refused to let her be lost again.